What's up guys, Sagi here and welcome to another Tech Gear Talk. Today we're going to compare two great beginner cameras from Canon, the SL3 and the M50. The SL3, which is also known as the 250D, is a small DSLR with some great features, and it was just released as an update to the extremely popular SL2. On the other side we have the Canon EOS M50, which is a super compact and powerful mirrorless camera. And it was the first mirrorless camera from Canon to offer 4K video. We're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses of both cameras when it comes to photography and video, so hopefully I can help you decide which option is best for you. Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to get into the details for each aspect of the two cameras, but to start out I want to talk about some overall key features. The M50 has a 24.1 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor. It uses Canon's super nice dual pixel autofocus system, which is awesome. It has the brand new Digic 8 processor, which helps improve speed and performance as well as image quality. We've got a 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen LCD, and it can shoot video at up to 4K 24 frames per second. The M50 has combination IS, which uses 5-axis digital image stabilization with lens-based IS. There's a really nice OLED electronic viewfinder. It has Wi-Fi with NFC and Bluetooth, so you can easily move images to your mobile device. And you now have full control over the camera for both photography and video using the Canon Camera Connect app. The SL3 also has a 24.1 megapixel APS-C sensor, and it also uses Canon's super nice dual pixel autofocus system, which again, it's great. We see the same Digic 8 processor, which again helps improve speed, performance, and image quality. It also has a 3-inch fully articulating touchscreen LCD, and again, we can shoot video at up to 4K at 24 frames per second. The SL3 has an optical viewfinder, and it has improved Wi-Fi with NFC and Bluetooth, so you can more easily move images to your mobile device. And like the M50, we also have full control of the camera for both photography and video using the Canon Camera Connect app. First, I want to talk about camera types. So the SL3 is a DSLR and the M50 is a mirrorless camera. If you've never quite been sure about the difference, let me take a minute to explain. So the way a DSLR like the SL3 works is that light passes through the lens and then hits a mirror that's sitting right in front of the sensor at an angle. The light is then redirected up the camera body where it hits another couple of mirrors which let you see the image using the viewfinder. So it's essentially a prism. When you take a picture, the mirror in the front of the sensor flips up and out of the way, and then the shutter opens and the light can hit the sensor. If you're shooting video, the mirror just locks in the open position and then the light is constantly hitting the sensor. Now on a mirrorless camera like the M50, obviously there's no mirror, so the sensor sits directly behind the lens. The sensor is constantly being exposed to light, which is how you're able to see the image using the electronic viewfinder. And when you go to take a picture, it's then covered by the shutter, then uncovered, and then covered again. And this is one of the main reasons why mirrorless cameras are smaller than DSLRs, because you don't have a mirror sitting in front of the sensor. The lens can be mounted much closer to the sensor, and therefore the body can be made much thinner. You also don't have the whole prism system leading up to the optical viewfinder, so the body can be made a lot smaller. These cameras have similar build quality, and Canon definitely focused on creating pretty solid camera bodies with good and secure grips on both the SL3 and the M50. The SL3 for a DSLR is super light, and even with an 18 to 55mm lens or with this 50 1.8, it still weighs less than 2 pounds. Now, of course, the M50 being a mirrorless camera, it's still smaller and lighter, so even with this 15 to 45mm kit lens, it still weighs just a little bit over a pound. So as far as portability goes, I'm going to give the advantage to the M50 because it is smaller and lighter than the SL3. Now, the trade-off as far as portability goes might come in terms of handling. So some people like the body of the SL3 because it's a little bit bigger and it has a deeper grip. Now, next I want to talk about the viewfinders, and the SL3 being a DSLR has an optical viewfinder. On the other hand, the M50 has an electronic viewfinder. What I like about optical viewfinders is that they give you a sense of being in the scene, and a good optical viewfinder can be a great option when you're shooting in very low light, where the responsiveness and resolutions don't suddenly drop. On the other hand, the electronic viewfinder on the M50 gives you a larger view of the scene, and it helps you with immediate feedback when you're making changes to your exposure, because you can immediately see them in the viewfinder. Now, I'm not going to give either one of these an advantage because it's less a matter of which one of these is better, and it's more a question of how you use your camera and what you like better. Now, as far as battery life, the SL3 is rated for 1070 shots, which is awesome, and I can definitely shoot all day without having to worry about bringing an additional battery. Now, as a disclaimer, I do always bring a backup battery regardless of which camera I use, because it's better to have it and not need it than to get in a location and then not be able to shoot because something happened to the battery. The M50 is rated for 235 shots, which is obviously a lot less than the SL3. Now, I did a dedicated video showing 3 ways to solve the battery issue on the M50, and I'll link to that video up in the corner and in the description. Now, the edge here easily goes to the SL3 because it's rated for 1070 shots versus the 235 shots on the M50. Both the SL3 and the M50 have a 24 megapixel APS-C CMOS sensor, which Canon uses on more expensive APS-C models. Now, all things being equal, the bigger the sensor, the better it is. And a bigger sensor means better image quality because it's able to use more information to create an image with more detail and better dynamic range. This APS-C sensor is excellent if you're shooting landscape, portraits, if you're doing street photography, if you want to take it with you while you travel, or even if you just do family and lifestyle photography. It's also a great choice for shooting video, creating content for YouTube, or if you're just a hobbyist. It's going to give you really nice and crisp video, and of course, Canon's color science is fantastic. All in all, the 24 megapixel APS-C sensor on the SL3 and the M50 is a great value. It gives you really nice performance at a very affordable price. As far as the sensor goes, I'm going to call it a tie because both cameras use essentially the same sensor. Moving on to processors, both the SL3 and the M50 use the newer Digic 8 processor. So as far as that goes, again, it's a tie. Again, together with a nice sensor, both cameras will give you sharp images and video and good low light performance. A general menu operation is fast for both of these cameras. They both have very quick startup, and then things like image preview, video playback, they're both very fast. Because of how I shoot, one of the features that I look for in every camera is continuous or burst shooting. You can just point the camera at a subject, hold down the shutter, and the camera will just keep firing. And this is a nice feature if you're photographing sports, pets, kids running around, or any fast-moving subject. Now, of course, the more frames you can have per second, the more exposures you'll have to pick from later on. Now, the M50 can shoot at up to 10 frames per second, where the SL3 can only shoot at up to 5 frames per second. So the edge, of course, goes to the M50 because you'll have twice as many exposures to pick from, and you're more likely to get the exact moment you wanted to capture. Next, I want to talk about resolution and frame rates. For photography, both cameras offer 6,000 by 4,000 pixel images. So as far as head-to-head resolution, it's a tie. As far as image quality, I've been getting pretty similar results with maybe a slight advantage to the SL3. I did a detailed comparison between my SL2 and the M50, and the slight advantage of the SL2 could be in part due to the SL3 kit lens being better than the M50 kit lens. I'll do a more detailed image quality comparison between these cameras in another video, this time using an adapter so that I can use the exact same lens. And if this is something that you're interested in, let me know in the comment section, and make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Now let's get to the video recording options, and both of these cameras can shoot 4K at 24 and 25 frames per second. And we'll come back to discuss 4K in a second, but I just want to get to 1080p where we find a pretty significant difference. So before I get to the options, I just want to mention that your choice of frames per second comes down to what you want your video to look like. If you like a more cinematic look, you go with 24 frames per second. If you want something sharper and more crisp, you shoot at 60 frames per second. I shoot most of my videos, including this one, at 30 frames per second. And if you edit your videos at 30 frames per second like I do, you can play your 60 frames per second from both of these cameras at 30 frames per second and get slow motion at up to 50%. Okay, enough with the math. So the M50 can shoot full HD or 1080p at 24, 30, and 60 frames per second if you're shooting in NTSC. The SL3 only offers 1080p at 30 and 60, so Canon removed the ability to shoot at 24 frames per second. And this is something that you probably heard me talk about before. I really can't understand what Canon is doing here. I have other videos that talk about this topic, and if you watched my SL2 cinematic footage tutorial, you know that if you want to get cinematic looking footage, you want to shoot at 24 frames per second. So now this option is only available on the SL3 if you're shooting in 4K. Right off the bat, you might say, okay, fine, I'll just shoot in 4K. There's lots of reasons why I might want to shoot in 4K. So here's the thing, when you shoot in 4K on both of these cameras, you have to apply an additional crop factor of 1.6x. So the total crop factor is 2.64x, and this is something that you need to pay attention to. To give you an example, I'm going to use one of the lenses from my best lenses video, this 51.8, and I'm going to put it on the SL3. If I shoot at 1080p, it converts it to an 80mm equivalent field of view because the SL3, just like the M50, has an APS-C sensor. That's fine, I know that when I buy the camera. But now when I use it in 4K, I have to apply an additional crop factor, which gives me around 132mm field of view. So first of all, this is a very tight shot, and it would require me to either use an extremely wide lens or to move the camera farther away from the subject in order to get the same framing. And in addition to that, with both of these cameras, the dual pixel autofocus doesn't work when you're shooting in 4K. Alright, so where does this leave me? I'm going to give the advantage to the M50 because it does give me the option to get cinematic footage at 1080p 24 frames per second. Alright, let's move to lens options. The SL3 can accept both EF and EFS mount lenses, while the M50 uses an EFM mount. That means that right out of the box, I'm giving a big advantage to the SL3 because I just have so many more options to choose from. The EFM mount lenses are definitely limited, especially when it comes to really fast lenses. And by the way, when I say fast lenses, I don't mean how fast the shutter speed can be, but rather how much you can open each lens up and let more light in. The SL3 lets me use all of my L series glass from Canon, so I have lots of flexibility. I'm going to just add that if you still want to use EF and EFS mount lenses on the M50, you can buy an adapter from either Canon or a number of third-party vendors. Now this adapter does open the door to you using all the same lenses that fit the SL3 at the cost of having to buy and carry another piece of gear. I'm still giving the advantage to the SL3 because it natively accepts a much larger selection of lenses, both from Canon and other manufacturers. If you're looking for some of my lens recommendations for each of these cameras, I'll link to a recent video that I published that will walk you through different types of lenses, show you what they're used for, and then give you some recommendations for different budgets. One thing to remember is that because both cameras have an APS-C sensor and not a full frame sensor, there's a crop factor of 1.6x for each lens, which means that you have to take the focal length on the lens and then multiply by 1.6 in order to get the 35mm equivalent field of view. So for example, if I take this 50mm 1.8 and I put it on the SL3, it actually provides an 80mm field of view if I compare it to what it would look like on a full frame sensor camera like the Canon EOS R. If you have any questions about this, I know this gets confusing, please let me know in the comment section and I'll explain it in more detail. Alright, next let's talk about autofocus, and this for me is one of the most important factors when I choose a camera. And the good news is that both the SL3 and the M50 use Canon's dual pixel autofocus system, which is great. This is definitely one of the best autofocus systems on the market at any price point, and I never get any type of focus hunting or any issues when I use it. For photography, when using the viewfinder, the SL3 has a 9-point autofocus system with the center point being a cross type point. When using the electronic viewfinder on the M50, you're still using the dual pixel autofocus system, and you can pick between 99 and 143 different autofocus points depending on which lens you're using. In addition to that, you can also have face tracking active while shooting with the electronic viewfinder, and that lets the M50 automatically identify, track, and keep the focus of your subject in focus. So if using the viewfinder, I'm going to give a big advantage to the M50. If you plan on using the LCD to shoot, now both the SL3 and the M50 use the dual pixel autofocus. Now remember that the M50 gives us between 99 and 143 autofocus points depending on which lens you're using. The SL3 is reported to give us 3,975 points. Continuing with using the LCD for photography, now both cameras offer face tracking, so both the SL3 and the M50 can identify a face and then track it as it moves through the frame and then keep it in focus. One advantage of the SL3 is that you're able to use cross arrow buttons to move from one face to another in your frame, which is really cool when there's more than one person in your shot. Moving on to video, this is where great continuous autofocus is critical. If you're vlogging and walking around with the camera, or if you're just doing talking head video, you can always set the focus manually, but as you move around or you switch the camera from one hand to the other, or if your subject is moving forward and moving back, even those slight changes will really affect your focus plane. So like I said in the past about cameras that use the dual pixel autofocus system, it's just crushes it. It's just so good. It gets it right every time. For both cameras, it will just automatically detect faces, and then you can just watch it follow it through the frame and then adjust the focus. With the SL3, we can also use eye detection when shooting video in both 4K and Full HD. So as long as the subject is facing the camera, the eye detection is going to work great. So for the purpose of creating YouTube content or shooting interviews or just video work in general, I think that continuous autofocus is definitely a feature that you're going to want to look at. And another great feature that both of these cameras have is the ability to click on different subjects on the screen and then have both of these cameras automatically rack focus for me. I can get a really cool transition where in my video I talk about one thing and then I want to shift the viewer's attention to something else I'm going to talk about, and then I can just click on it and it will smoothly rack focus. So finally, we also have subject tracking for both of these cameras. So we can just click on anything on the screen and the SL3 or the M50 will put a white square around it, and then it will just automatically follow it through the frame and keep it in focus. I want to point out again that on the SL3 and the M50, if you're shooting in 4K, you don't get to use the dual pixel autofocus system. So as far as autofocus goes, this is an interesting choice. If you're gonna use the viewfinder for photography, then the M50 gives you more functionality, the dual pixel autofocus, many more autofocus selection points, and face and subject tracking. If you're gonna use the LCD for photography, then I'm gonna give the edge to the SL3 because it has eye detection and gives us an extra level of precision when it comes to autofocus, and you have way more autofocus points to select from. If I'm going to use the LCD for video with both of these cameras, again I'm going to give the SL3 the advantage because I can use eye detection even for video. Something else that I love about both the SL3 and the M50 for video is that they both have a 3.5mm mic input. That's a great feature if you want higher production value because it allows you to use an external microphone instead of the built-in microphone on both of these cameras. So I can easily connect a shotgun mic to both the SL3 and the M50, and I'll immediately get much better audio. And I still get a nice and compact setup. It's light and portable, and I get great video and great audio. And it's just perfect for vlogging, for shooting talking head video, and really any time when I want to get a more directional sound pickup than what the omnidirectional mic on these cameras will do. There are a lot of outstanding microphone options, and I'll put some links in the descriptions to some of my favorite. Now, as far as using a lavalier microphone, I can use a wire lav with both the SL3 and the M50 if I don't mind being tethered to the camera. Or I can even use a wireless setup where I can connect the receiver to the camera and the transmitter to my microphone, and then I don't have to worry about being attached to the camera. I can always just put the camera down and step back or walk around, and the mic is always attached to me. Now, a huge advantage that the SL3 has over the M50 is that you can see the audio levels on the LCD. And this is true while you're setting up, but it's more important that you can see them while you're recording. So you can easily see if your audio levels are correct so that you can make any necessary adjustments. Now, as far as audio goes, I'm going to give the edge to the SL3 because I think being able to see the audio levels is a very important feature for video. Moving on, both the SL3 and the M50 have a super versatile 3-inch 1.04 million dot fully articulating touchscreen. It can be flipped and locked into position on the back of the camera if you're behind the camera, or it can be flipped again for protection and storage when you're not using it. I love the fact that with both of these cameras I can point the screen up if I'm shooting from my waist or on a slider on a low tripod, and I like the flexibility of having it point down if I have the camera above my head. It's also great to be able to point it to the side when I'm working again on a slider or on a gimbal, and I never feel like I need an external monitor. So as far as the screen goes, I'm going to call it a tie because the LCD screen is essentially the same. Next, let's talk about connectivity and remote control options. So both the SL3 and the M50 come with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth options that work with the Canon Camera Connect app. And the app lets you connect a mobile device wirelessly and then transfer images and video so you can quickly share them. So both the SL3 and the M50 can use the app to remotely control the camera for photos, and you can have the camera set up, use your phone as a remote screen, change settings and focus, and then take your picture. When it comes to video, again, both cameras give you complete control over the shooting features using the app. You can frame your scene, you can change your settings, you can set focus, and then remotely start and stop recording. And this is a great feature if you're shooting by yourself or if you're streaming. It really makes being in front of the camera a lot easier. There's no more walking back and forth to the camera to start and stop. I can just sit down, move myself around or the camera until I get the shot exactly how I want, and then I can start and stop my video right from my phone. As far as the wireless connection interface, the SL3 uses a more user-friendly integration for wireless setting in the menu. Canon actually added a dedicated top-level menu option, which I really like because you don't have to go searching for it in the menu. And even though this is only a slight advantage, I'm going to give that advantage to the SL3. Okay, now I want to talk about a few other features that might help you make a buying decision, and we'll get to the final verdict. Both cameras do in-body 1080p and 4K time-lapse. It's super simple to use, and it's much easier for most people than to use an external intervalometer and then having to take those pictures and convert them into a time-lapse using software. Both the M50 and the SL3 have 3 specific time-lapse scenarios built in, so fast, slow, and slower subject movement. They will automatically pick the right setting for your time-lapse shot. You can also adjust these settings if you want to save 3 different presets. And finally, if you want a little more control over your time-lapse, there's also a custom setting which gives you full control. All you do is select an interval in seconds, which is how long between each shot, how many shots you want the camera to take, and whether you want auto exposure to be used on the first image and then remain the same, or if you want the camera to auto expose for each picture. And I really love that both of these cameras offer 4K time-lapse, which I think is a game changer. First, if you're using a 4K timeline, you're going to need to be able to fill your frame. And then second, if you're actually working in 1080p, you can have a 4K time-lapse, which will give you a lot of options in terms of framing. And if you have any questions about that, just let me know in the comment section and I'll explain. Now next I want to talk about one of the most exciting features of the SL3, and that is a clean HDMI out. That means that the SL3 can output video that does not include the menu and focus overlay. So with the M50, unless you use special software, you could only stream by using manual focus and then hiding the on-screen elements to mimic a clean HDMI out. But with the SL3, you can have autofocus with face and eye detection turned on and still get beautiful, crisp, in-focus video right to your stream. You can also record 422 video externally and get amazing footage with more information on it to use when you're color correcting or color grading. So for anyone who wants to do a live stream, the SL3 is an incredible option and definitely has a significant advantage over the M50. Another new feature only offered on the SL3 is Smooth Skin Mode, which offers 5 levels of skin smoothing to help reduce blemishes and make the subject's skin appear soft. Now next I want to discuss the hot shoe functionality, which, like I said in some of my other videos, is not something that I normally talk about because there usually isn't much to say, but this is a distinction that will be very important to people who use a flash. With the SL3, Canon removed the center pin, so now the SL3 is not compatible with most third-party flashes and accessories. The M50 does have the center pin, so you can use much less expensive options if you plan on adding an external flash. And finally, let's talk about price and value. And my goal with every product comparison is to give you a detailed overview of the products and compare them in a way that relates to real-life use. And if you found this video helpful, let me know in the comment section. It really helps. I'm also going to include some links in the description to where you can buy these cameras, as well as some of my favorite accessories. And if you end up using those links to buy anything, not just these 2 items, you help support my channel for free and you allow me to create more content for you. So thank you. At the time I'm shooting this video, the SL3 body sells for $549 and the M50 sells for $579. So that's an extra $30. Now, of course, depending on when you're watching this, the prices may be different, but hopefully they're close enough. I don't normally look just at the price, I look at value and I think about what you're paying and then what are you getting for that money, and then I try to figure out which is the best combination. Alright, so which camera is a better value and which one should you get? When I look at the total cost of ownership of a camera, including the lenses and the accessories, $30 is not so much of a significant difference. The M50 is a good choice if you want a smaller and more portable camera and lenses, something that you can take with you anywhere without too much of an inconvenience. Other advantages are more autofocus options and control when using the viewfinder for photography, and the ability to get 24 frames per second cinematic footage in Full HD or 1080p. If you're looking for a much better battery life, eye detection for both photography and video as long as you're using the LCD, audio level display for video, and a slightly larger and a bit more comfortable body, then the SL3 is a good choice. If you plan on doing live streaming, then again the SL3 is a clear winner because it comes with a clean HDMI out, which lets you get clean, crisp, and in-focus video right into your streaming software. I always say that you can't have everything in any camera, so it comes down to what's important to you and how you use the camera. I do my best to answer every question, so if you have any additional questions, just drop them in the comment section. Finally, I'll put some links in the description to more detailed reviews of each of these cameras in case you want a more in-depth review. I really hope this video gave you a good comparison between the SL3 and the M50, and I'd love to hear in the comment section which option is best for you. If it was helpful, please let me know by giving it a thumbs up, tweet it, share it, and if you haven't yet, join the community by hitting the subscribe and notification buttons. You can always find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Tech Gear Talk, and you know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck, and see you soon. Both the SL3 and the M50 do something. They both do something. Definitely both these are both cameras for sure. It's gonna give you really nice and crisp video. You're gonna get some video. Now, of course, the more frames you get per second, the more exposures you'll have to pick from. Shh, quiet. See, I have to go do stuff. To get cinematic footed. Nice, footed. Left-footed or right-footed? Please stop. Waiting for Babu to stop barking. Third-party providers. Oh, that was so close. I was so close. Please hold. Please hold. We got a power situation here. I'll be back. Well, I'm gonna go right here. I just can't say it. I don't know why, but I can't say it. Okay, focus. Continuing with you. So bad. All right, I can do this. I can do it. And I still get, but I can't get this sentence right.